Okay. I believe we're live. Did that last night for some reason. We're here on the second anniversary. I don't even know if anniversary is the right word, Joe, but it's 2 years since the massacre. How you doing, man?
I'm doing okay.
You're
It's a somber
well.
day, of course.
Yeah.
How have you been?
I'm good. I know you've had a rough time lately for other reasons as well. I don't think we want to go into that. Or, well, you put it out on social media. You lost your dad recently. Very sorry about that, Joe.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate it. It wasn't sudden. And you know, I think I shared with you off and on his health and how it was deteriorating. So, but it really picked up speed this summer, and in August he took his last breath. So, the Sicilian John Wayne, his buddies used to call him.
And how's your wife doing, Joe? I know you guys have been through a lot since the shooting. It was a real traumatic event. It was, let's face it was like being in a war, right?
Yeah, no, it was. Firsthand knowledge of war for sure. Maybe not like being overseas like our men and women have, but I can certainly imagine what they go through much more than what we did last year. But it was horrific. It was awful. Yeah. And this time of year, the last couple of years, it's rough. My wife is doing okay. She's doing good, but she is pretty emotional leading up to the anniversary today. So thank you for asking. But it's gotten slowly better as the days, weeks, and months have gone on. But I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy for sure.
Yeah. That's what I was going to ask you, is if it's gotten any better. I know you've been to some groups and some support groups and things like that. Is any of that still happening, and is it helping? Did it help?
It helped at first. We haven't, we've actually, my wife and I have been able to really lean on each other, which has really helped. The forums that we attended soon after the shooting, I would say they did help. They helped tremendously. We stopped going and started to do a kind of one-on-one with our own therapist, couples-wise, instead of in a group setting. We've been able to lean on each other, and it's brought us closer for sure.
I think we might have just been knocked offline, Joe. The thing just
no. I think I screwed up. Bear with me. I think I closed my browser window.
No, that shouldn't do it.
My fault.
It got knocked offline. The YouTube video has stopped. What we're going to do, Joe, is let's keep recording, and then I'll replace this afterwards. That's really unfortunate. So we're not live right now, but we've got you here. Sure. I don't want to start it again. I'm not sure what's causing that. I'm in a hotel right now, obviously, so it's not the usual setup. People are going to be so disappointed. They're waiting for this. Let's just keep going.
Let me see if it was something I was doing.
No, it's nothing you're doing. It's over here.
You sure?
Anyway, the voice reveals, Joe, that today we're going to be introducing the audience to John Cullen, a guy who's been doing investigation into this really unprecedented investigation beyond, I think, what the FBI has done, beyond what the police have done. Earlier today, I released a video. I'm going to play that video right now just so everybody can see what we're talking about here. Let's just look at that real quick, Joe.
Who's that?
How about if I go outside and take a photograph of a Thai license plate? How about we do that?
No, that doesn't do it for me. Take a picture of your face and put that up.
No, because you've had people threatening your life and your car's been shot at.
Because
you're the reason. You're the reason I don't show my face, Jake.
By your name. you put out these bizarre theories that can't be substantiated.
Okay, I appreciate what you're doing, Jake, and I support it, but let's just dial it down a notch and let's give John an opportunity to present us something that might be acceptable.
I lived in rural Thailand. They don't have high. He's not going to be doing this, pushing these videos out of rural Thailand.
Useless.
That'd be like a hut in the middle of Africa.
And there he is, Joe. After all that time, I'm really, I mean, it's obviously a somber day, but I am pleased to introduce the audience to John Cullen. John, why don't you turn the camera on there and show everybody what you look like.
Let's see what happens here. Bear with me. See if that works.
Joe, I know you've been following John's investigation, and you know it's obviously very frustrating to not get answers from the FBI, from the police. What can you say about John and the investigation that he's been doing?
You know, he nothing short of amazing, and I'm putting it lightly. I can't think of another way to put it. He has undoubtedly uncovered so much evidence that our own law enforcement, our own government refuses to look at, refuses to do on their own. But John unselfishly has shown the world basically what happened the night of October 1st, 2017. And every video that he does, he shows more evidence, and more even evidence that's been corroborated as well. First and foremost, the shell casings that I saw, there are three other people who saw the same in the same area right around relatively the same time I saw them. That's just one of several that Cullen's been able to establish here. And every video he does, it gets better and better. John, thanking you would be a cosmic understatement, man.
Well, there's no thanks necessary. This is, I don't know, it's like a duty. So it's an honor to do this work. But I think the video that you just shared with everybody, where obviously you revealed what I look like, it was a very bold move on the part of Jason. So first of all, Jason brought us together, right? So you and I met because of Jason. Jason's the first guy to really put any air under the wings. Jason was Shepard Ambellis at IntelliHub, to put any air underneath the wings of this research and to say, my God, this might actually be accurate. So what happened and how that video clip came to be, I think, is a stunning, just kind of quick intro before I pull the mask away from the camera here. I called Jason and I said to Jason, I'm going to be leaving where I'm living here in Thailand. I'm leaving this area. And I invited Jason to come to Thailand, but I didn't tell him where he was going. I said, fly to Bangkok, call me from Bangkok, and I will tell you where to go from there. And on that gentleman's agreement, Jason Goodman got on an airplane.
Not surprised at all. Well done, Jason.
Thanks, Joe. I actually forgot to tell John that I wasn't going to reveal that tonight. I was going to wait until we put out the interview, but it's okay. John, let everybody see you, man. Let's pull away the mask.
All right, here we go.
There we go. There he is, John Cullen.
That away, John.
Welcome to the show. And we're going to be joined by Laura Loomer in a few minutes. We had a little hotel internet mishap here, so this will go out live at midnight tonight, which may be even more appropriate because it'll end, Joe, right around the time that the shooting began. People probably remember, I've said it many times, I was asleep in bed in New York, and you called me maybe around 6 or 7 a.m. It was 3 or 4 a.m. Pacific time, and you had just come out of the Tropicana where you, your wife, your brother-in-law, a couple friends, you guys had been hunkered down in there, very tightly controlled by the LVMPD. What do you think about that now, looking back, knowing what you know today versus how you felt in there on the day?
Well, first, when we first got into the Tropicana, I would say about after an hour of being there, we saw somebody just up and start running down that long hallway with the metal railing in the middle that you and I saw when we did the walkthrough.
Right.
And because he thought he heard gunshots, we never heard the gunfire, but we ran because he was running, and so everybody else ran. Come to find out that one of Cullen's videos, there's a helicopter, maybe two, hovering over the Tropicana.
Right.
So, I mean, again, based on my experience that night and what I know now with John's videos and your work and such, you know, it's kind of one of those things where I wish I would have known then what I know now type thing.
Right.
But I mean, who knows? With helicopters above the Tropicana, I think I'm glad that we were hunkered down in the basement there. But you were the second person I called. I called my daughter, and then as soon as we got out of the Tropicana and made our way over to the MGM, is when I called you.
Yeah. And you've played that phone call for me that you, the voicemail from Scarlett's phone. Oh, sorry,
Right.
Joe. I don't know if you didn't want me to say her name.
That's no problem.
But
No
you could
problem.
hear the gunshots in the background while you're talking to her. It's a pretty nutty
At the very
thing.
beginning.
Yeah. The whole experience is just totally wild. And this video that you and I did, when did we do this? Was this a year after the event, or maybe it was?
I actually think could have been the same year though, just a few months after that though.
Maybe, yeah. It's hard to remember now.
But I mean, I just look at myself there as we're walking around, and I can tell, just looking in my eyes and how I'm biting my lower lip, that I've definitely got a lot on my mind, and you know, maybe still in you know, maybe months later, and just being there, you know, it takes you back to just a horrific time, and a lot of times it's hard to explain, especially if you've never been in it before.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, you were totally uneasy because I remember even after the camera stopped rolling, it was almost like you were keeping it together on camera. And, you know, when you and I spoke afterwards was really where the catharsis came.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So there's a lot of pressure.
It's emotional. It's,
yeah.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, John,
It
did
brings
we
back
lose
a
you?
lot
Or
of,
is John still there?
Yeah.
No,
I can hear you.
I'm still here. Yeah, I just turned my camera off as I grabbed a sip of water.
Okay. Sorry, Joe. You were saying it is very emotional, obviously.
Yeah. And, you know, I think John and even you, Jason, you guys have done an excellent job. And these families of the victims deserve answers. They just do.
Yeah.
And I've always said it's not about me. But if there's anything that I can do, whether it's, you know, talking to you now or doing the walkthrough like we did, or helping out in any way here from Southern Cal, just so the families of the victims can have answers. And I actually think that they do now, or very, very close to it. There may be more. John, I'm sure you'll let us know, but yeah, this is about them, and this is about the 58 who were taken from this earth way too early, for absolutely no reason. And yeah, it's an emotional time for sure.
And Joe, it adds insult to injury, the treatment that you've received online from people who have told you that the shooting was fake, that you weren't there. It's like, who the hell are these people that they're coming out and saying stuff
Nobody
like that?
died, nobody was shot, they were dummies in front of the stage. I will tell you this, if that gunfire happened on Friday and Saturday night, we all would have been either killed or seriously wounded, because we were stage front, but we were to the right of Jason Aldean, so we were actually more towards his right, but still in the front of the stage. And any video that you see now that shows the crowd in front of the stage during the shooting, everybody in front of the stage was down. Everybody was getting down on their knees, on their stomach, and hiding and taking cover. So if any of that went on Friday and Saturday night, we would have been in serious trouble. So
I think Laura's ready, guys. I want to bring her in so we can talk some more about the investigation and everything. And while I'm bringing in Laura, Joe, how's your impression of the FBI changed? Did you initially think they were going to actually solve this and give us some answers, or?
I thought at the very beginning that they would be heavily involved in this for obvious reasons. I mean, it's the worst shooting massacre in U.S. history. Why wouldn't they?
But I mean, did you have confidence in them at the time that they might actually do some good and help us figure out what happened?
Not really, no. I thought that they would, do their job, but I wasn't confident they would. And quite frankly, I'm not surprised, as we have distanced ourselves from 2 years ago, and based on what John and you have covered as part of your investigations. You become more angry, more frustrated, but not surprised whatsoever, and no confidence at all.
And we've got Laura with us now. Laura, we've got John Cullen and Joe Napoli on. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing well. It's good to see you.
Laura.
Thank you for taking time away from the congressional campaign. People should go to LauraLoomerForCongress.com. We're just talking about, Joe. You've met Joe before, and John is revealing himself to the public for the first time. Laura, you were one of the first to report that this was an ISIS attack, and I know that John has wanted to talk to you about that for a long, long time. John, anything you want to say to Laura?
Hi, Laura.
Hi, how's it going?
It's going great. Nice to see you.
So John, of course, is best known for the information that he's brought forward that indicates that the Saudi Arabian National Guard was involved in this attack. I've just learned the other day from listening to a podcast with John Kiriakou, there's actually no Saudis in the Saudi Arabian National Guard. They're all Pakistanis. And that's quite interesting because ISIS, as we know, is a ragtag group of jihadi fighters made up from all countries and all nationalities. So it's actually, you both were reporting basically the same thing. It's kind of a matter of semantics, isn't that right?
Yeah, certainly I think so. I mean, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Al-Nusra Front, I mean, call them what you will, but at the end of the day, we've named names. And Mansour bin Mukran, Maiteb bin Abdullah, these are the guys that were rounded up. And Mansour bin Mukran is dead. So, if you want to say that these guys had ISIS affiliations, Al-Qaeda affiliations, I'm guessing the answer is yes and yes.
And Laura, obviously there's been very little new information about Vegas in a long, long time. Have you been covering it at all? I mean, you've been very obviously occupied with your congressional campaign. What are you hearing about Vegas? Anything?
Well, I was doing extensive on-the-ground reporting, for about a year and a half, and then I was banned on social media. And so I was frequently in Vegas, and every so often I was on the ground, and I'm in contact with various individuals who were getting access to the different files and the videotapes that were being released on the thumb drives by LVMPD on the schedule after they were ordered by the court to release the videos. But this is one of the main issues regarding deplatforming and censorship. You see that nobody is really talking about the Las Vegas shooting in the mainstream media, and the people who are talking about it have all been shut down. And John, I remember a few months ago, getting a message from, I believe it was you, Jason, that your account maybe had been suspended or temporarily shut down. And so
that's right.
So a lot of the people who were reporting on the Las Vegas shooting were shut down and censored. And now you see YouTube is deleting videos that they view as conspiratorial. And of course, anybody who went against the official narrative in which they said that Stephen Paddock was a lone shooter with mental illness who just went crazy was considered a conspiracy theorist. And we've seen to date, a lot of the videos, if not majority of the videos regarding the Vegas shooting, have been completely wiped from YouTube.
Yeah, that's right. And it's ironic, Laura, because this live stream video that we've just started tonight got cut off from being live about 3 minutes into it. I can't say why that is. It's a pretty rare occurrence, but we'll put it out right after we're done recording. I know everybody's on a tight time schedule, so I didn't want to start it over. But the deplatforming is a big deal. John's been deplatformed, you've been deplatformed. So now that you're running for Congress, are any of these social media things giving you a platform back?
No, actually, I'm a declared congressional candidate, and I don't have access to social media. And so yesterday was, actually today at midnight, was the deadline for the first quarter fundraising cutoff. And so I had to fundraise. For my campaign these last, month and a half since August 2nd when I filed, without social media. I don't have a Facebook. I don't have a Twitter. I don't have any campaign social media. I just have my website, lauraloomerforcongress.com, because according to Facebook, I'm too dangerous to exist online, which is rather hilarious given the fact that a whistleblower report recently came out that showed that Facebook was auto-generating ads and pages for ISIS. So if you are Laura Loomer, you're too dangerous for Facebook, and your videos and all of your reports about the Las Vegas shooting will be shut down on sites. If you recall, remember I was using Medium as a way to push out my articles about Vegas? I had 4 articles about the Las Vegas shooting on my Medium account. I didn't have anything else besides Las Vegas shooting reporting, and Medium banned me. So there's your answer as to why there's not a lot of information out there about Vegas. A lot of people who are investing a lot of time and resources into investigating this are being shut down and silenced and labeled as conspiracy theorists.
Yeah.
And I know John knows how.
Right. And a lot of people are even getting hit with legal fees and everything like that. You know, it's really unbelievable. And now we've got this fake whistleblower coming out against the president. I mean, you know, Laura, hopefully you can get into Congress there and affect some change. We've got some real crazy people who are in there. John, I know you had a bunch of things you wanted to ask Laura, right?
Well, first of all, you know, Laura had so many breaks on the case. One of the big ones, I did a couple of videos. Most people don't know that Laura and I met shortly after the attack, and we have talked privately, and that has been it. So we know each other, we've talked privately, but that has been the extent of, but what I have done is taken breaks that Laura has made in the case and leverage those breaks. So for example, Laura, you can search my channel for Laura and you'll find a bunch of videos. But one of them in particular was a break that Laura made that I think she rolled out on Alex's show, which was that there were 3 women in the room with Stephen Paddock. And there you go, Laura Loomer, the honeypot, and the 3 women sleeping with Paddock. And so this was one of, I think, Laura's key breaks, which was that there's 3 women in the room with Stephen Paddock registered to the room. How is that not interesting to CNN, NBC, CBS, Fox? No, that's...
And John, is that any of that in the FIT report?
No, that's the point. That's the point. Laura, you want to talk about it? I mean, it's your break.
Yeah, it is in one of the transcriptions. So if you recall, Do you remember when I showed up to the Las Vegas shooting press conference just days after the shooting happened, and I confronted Lombardo and Aaron Rouse, and I was like, when are you going to stop lying to the people and actually update the timeline? Because you're saying he checked in on the 28th, and it shows he checked in on the 25th, right? So they constantly denied that, and then they were forced to admit that it was correct. They knew that the night of the shooting because they knew who he was, and when authorities walked into Mandalay Bay, they handed the receptionist at the desk the name Stephen Paddock with the check-in date from 9/25 to October 2nd and asked them to pull up all the information from his stay. So before they even went up to the room, they knew who was in the room, and they knew what his name was. That was the story I broke. Obviously, it was true because then months later, I think it was actually a year after the fact, you saw that the LVMPD had to release the recordings and the transcriptions from the police radios. And you see that they said that there were 3 women, and I wrote a story about this, and I'll send you the link, Jason, and you can put it in the comments of this YouTube video after you publish it. There were 3 women in the room. 3 women in the room, it said. And if you recall, right, there was room service receipts that I brought to the LVMPD press conference that week that said that there was room service for 2.
Right.
And then there was police footage that came out from the body cam that showed women's hair straighteners and what appeared to look like some type of sex toy, like a dildo. And this was in the room. Well, Stephen Paddock is not going to be using dildos or vibrators. He's a dude, right? So clearly there are women.
Never know.
I'm kind of holding on to a piece of information that I haven't been able to verify yet, but I obviously had a lot of sources in the aftermath of the Vegas shooting, and prior to being banned off of social media, I actually had identified one of the women who was in the room.
Wow. Yeah,
and I have this information, and the woman is a lesbian. One of the women is a lesbian, and they're, if you look at the transcription, it says there were 3 women. And I haven't published the information yet because, like I said, when you get deplatformed and you're not able to make trips or travel and 90% of your income has been cut off, you're not able to really sustain your investigations financially. But I had a lead on the identity of one of the women, and this is the issue with censorship. Censorship is preventing investigative journalists from, releasing information about the Las Vegas shooting and leads. And it's also one of the reasons why I'm very eager to get elected to Congress and win my congressional race, because, you saw the report I released 6 months after the fact that showed that members of Congress, several of them, had been briefed on evidence that showed that members of ISIS had crossed over the border illegally through Mexico and had participated in the Vegas shooting. And this is not a conspiracy theory. If you look at the clip of Representative Scott Perry on YouTube on Tucker Carlson's show, he said this. He said the same thing, and then they pretty much put a gag order on Congressman Perry, and you never saw him on Fox News again. But he said that he and several others had received information that ISIS terrorists had infiltrated the southern border and may have carried out the Vegas shooting. You can watch this on YouTube. This is a real clip of a sitting congressman admitting this information.
Wow. And when we take that in combination with so much of the evidence that John has discovered, I mean, look, this is a huge operation. This is a heavily coordinated thing. And we saw those guys running around in black suits on the top of the trailers, right, Joe? They had right around the concert, all those trailers. So you've got ground people. I think John has presented irrefutable evidence of helicopters, so it makes sense that these Saudi Arabian attack coordinators would bring in ISIS members. Hillary Clinton's emails that were exposed in the Podesta leaks on WikiLeaks say that Saudi Arabia is funding ISIS, so obviously they have access to mercenaries all over the world, bringing them in through Mexico or wherever, the porous border that President Trump wants to close up, that the Democrats want to leave open. Sounds like it would be consistent with everything that you've been talking about, John, doesn't it?
Certainly. You could dress up, as you said, a Pakistani ISIS soldier in a Sang uniform, bring him in under the guise of Operation Red Flag at Nellis. And they're in. And these guys, they had pilots, they had gunners, and people were massacred.
Seems like you'd want spotters and things, right? On the ground. I mean, people who would...
It's hard to say. It's hard to say the extent of the operation. But as soon as you see the aerial aspect of it, it changes everything. Because there's only a certain number of factions that could get their hands on these helicopters, where the next day or day 3 or day 4, there's nobody saying my helicopters were stolen, or our gunship Helicopters Vegas was overrun and they killed the guy at the counter and they stole our helicopters and now they're burned out in the desert. There was none of that. So if the helicopters weren't stolen, whose were they?
Right. Yeah.
And who would do something this heinous? And then who would our government cover it up for? There's really only one group, and this is where we go back to the 28pages.org.
Right.
We're covering up for the same families. This is just the next generation.
Right. And
it's a cover up for ISIS.
Yeah.
ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra Front. Again, I'll name names. Like I said, Mansour bin Mukran may have been a big supporter of ISIS. And Maita bin Abdullah might have been an old school Al-Qaeda guy. To me, if you had 4 Al-Qaeda guys and 4 ISIS guys, and I don't know that I'd be able to tell the difference. And I think they're all kind of embracing that Wahhabi, if you're not Wahhabi, if you're Shiite, you are a heretic, right? If you're, so if you're not a believer, forget about Jews and Christians. If you're a Shiite Muslim, you're a heretic, and they will kill you, and we've seen that.
I think it's also a well-known tactic that they just change the names of the group so that, people like us in the West think that it's a different group, but they are essentially the same. I'm not trying to minimize this reporting that ISIS was involved. I'm trying to say that this is such a convoluted thing, and we haven't been given access to any kind of proper investigation. As Laura said, they know deplatforming her is going to stop her from having financial resources to conduct this investigation. And frankly, she was being so effective that that's the reason they did it.
That's right.
Right. The FBI hates me. I mean, let's be honest, right? I embarrassed James Comey, who has ties to Vegas as well. A lot of the leadership in the Las Vegas FBI office is tied to McCabe and Comey. Several of the high-ranking officials worked in Comey's office, worked in McCabe's office. They all know each other, right? And so when you look at how corrupt our intelligence agencies have become, I mean, look at what happened in the 2016 election. Look at James Comey. Look at Peter Strzok. Look at Lisa Page. Look what's happening right now, right, with this whistleblower report.
Yeah.
I mean, do you really honestly think that we should be trusting the FBI when they tell us that when there's still bodies on the ground and people haven't even been dead for 24 hours after ISIS took responsibility? Oh, well, ISIS isn't responsible, you guys. We already know. How do you know? Right? They hadn't even conducted an investigation. The bodies were still on the ground. And ISIS has never taken responsibility for something that they're not responsible for. They've never done it. And there have been individuals in the past who have carried out attacks, and they said that they pledged their allegiance to ISIS, and ISIS goes, nope, he's not one of us. So I just
and they never said that about this, right? They never renounced that claim about Vegas.
No, ISIS claimed responsibility for Vegas 4 times. 4 times they claimed responsibility. And they said that Paddock had converted to Islam and that he had his own Islamic name. And it makes you wonder, I mean, and I've said this many times on interviews, Paddock very well could have been some type of government informant, and he was very deep within, embedded to the point where ISIS thought that he was one of them. And it would explain why there were so many guns in the room and why they were displayed in a way in which an arms deal would go down.
Right.
If you look at the photos were not just pictures of guns all over the place. No, the guns were aligned in a way that arms dealers or people who would be selling or trading weapons illegally would display them. And and what I found to be very interesting about the crime scene, more than anything else, the one thing that really made me believe that there was somebody else monitoring this, some type of intelligence agency, the activity in the room, to look at the operation, which I believe in my investigation, has provided evidence to this being some type of Fast and Furious 2.0 involving ISIS, right? They found a baby monitor in the room. And the thing that's interesting about baby monitors is that it has a Wi-Fi receiver. And so the only reason why you would need to use a baby monitor camera in order to record something in the room is if you wanted to transmit the activity in that room to another location.
Right.
And so we never got information about who was on the receiving end of that baby monitor camera that was found. That's it right there in the room. And so we know that the door next door was bolted, right? So clearly there was somebody in the other room. And, who was the other person in the other room that was listening in? I mean, you cannot say that somebody was not listening in or monitoring the activity in the room when that shooting went down, or the activity that was supposed to happen before everything went awry, because there's a Wi-Fi receptor on a baby monitor camera. There is no other reason why anybody would use a baby monitor camera unless they were trying to transmit it to another location.
Yeah, and there's just so much about it that we still don't know. This is why I like bringing you guys together, because everybody's had a different area of the investigation that they've focused on. Laura's been super involved in the on-the-ground human intelligence, developing sources and speaking to people who work at the hotel, who were, witnesses and victims there on the ground, and people who are in the police force and all that. John's been dealing with, I guess, essentially, signals intelligence, electronic intelligence, video evidence, and all that. So, we're sharing information here that maybe will hopefully make new connections for the first time.
Well, here's another area where Laura's work and my work touched without people really knowing about that. So this was kind of behind the scenes. Jason, you and I have revealed in the past that I was, in fact, the source of the autopsies that we got from. So I provided you those autopsies. You provided them to Laura, and you guys actually went to visit the coroner, didn't you?
Yeah.
The two of you?
Yeah.
So you guys went to the coroner. So clearly, all of us knew something's up with these autopsies. Something's wrong. And then I get the autopsy. Somebody leaks, these autopsies to me, and says, "I think you might be able to do more with these than we can at the network." And I started working with those autopsies. And when I started doing the math and figuring out the angles of these wounds, it got really spooky.
Right.
And
yeah. I mean, that was very interesting. And we went to the coroner's office, and that video is online. And, it was very interesting when we went to go see him, because he asked us to turn the cameras off when we were in the room. And, of course, in the days leading up to that, I had received a tip from inside the coroner's office that said that full autopsies were not being conducted on majority of the victims. And so why wouldn't you? You're supposed to. Whenever there's a homicide, you have to conduct a full autopsy. And so that was just another element to this whole cover-up process, because we saw that the budget for the county of Clark County, Nevada, increased substantially, millions of dollars more in the aftermath of the Las Vegas shooting. And I believe it was $15 million that was added onto the budget of the coroner's office, Jason, something along those lines.
Unbelievable.
We have the exact report, you just have to wonder, why were the salaries of the coroners increase so much in the aftermath of the Vegas shooting when they weren't even the coroners who were performing the autopsies? If you recall, they used coroners from
out of town,
outside of
Maryland, out of state, right?
Medically, and yet they gave them a substantial increase in pay, and so that just kind of adds to this whole suspicion of pay to play, and why in the aftermath of the worst, mass shooting, it's a terrorist attack, call it what it is. in U.S. history that all these officials in high-level positions in Clark County are getting what appears to be paid off.
Yeah.
And Sheriff Joe gets reelected.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
Which is
Let's
stunning,
talk for a minute
stunning.
more about the coroner himself, Laura, because he did make us turn off the cameras. What was your impression of John Fuddenberg?
Well, I didn't trust him at all. I think that he was anxious, and I think that he was talking to us to kind of see what we knew.
Right.
But it was clear that he wasn't really answering our questions because if he had nothing to hide, he would have said, "Oh yeah, by the way, all of the autopsies were fully conducted." But instead, he gave us these roundabout answers and wouldn't really answer the questions, and it was very bizarre, of course. So
I agree with you.
I don't trust anything that really came out of Vegas with any of the top level officials I spoke with because look what they did, right? They banned us from the LVMPD press conference. Why would you ban a journalist who was right? I never got an apology. And then Lombardo goes on the local news station and he says that I'm a menace and that I'm a problem and I'm a conspiracy theorist. When 1 year later, when the transcriptions came out, it was true that they knew that he checked in on the 25th. You could hear the police recording that they say suspect Paddock Stephen, and then they mentioned the room on the 32nd floor, and they said his check-in date was September 25th. And then that's what I was banned for exposing.
Yeah, Laura brings up a lot of great points. Laura brings up some great points, but Laura, I look at some of the most basic things, like with other murders, we usually see one of these diagrams where it shows where the bullets entered and where the bullets exited and all that kind of stuff. And we see none of that. Yeah. And if this is the biggest shooting in American history, why are we not doing those diagrams? That makes no sense to me. Am I asking a crazy question?
No, not at all. Laura and I did a follow-up show with Dr. Thomas Rudd, who also pointed out that there were a lot of inconsistencies in the way that these autopsies were performed. Laura, it was also pretty weird that you and I basically just walked up to the coroner's office on a rainy day, stood outside there for maybe 10 seconds, and he came right outside. Like he was monitoring our live stream. Had to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he probably was monitoring our live stream. I mean, it's clear that we were being monitored altogether because, look, I ended up getting banned from MGM Resorts, right? So they were monitoring a lot of our activity, and they had pictures of us. Remember, I had told you that my sources had said that there were pictures of me and several other journalists inside the security rooms telling them not to let us into the hotels if they saw us there. Wow. So they didn't want this information getting out there because, well, they're now facing a potentially like $1 billion lawsuit from the families of these victims and survivors. And their statements about what happened have drastically changed and been altered. And so you see these people trying to cover their ass, and the last thing they want is a bunch of popular investigative journalists showing up on their doorstep broadcasting this when they have never been pressed. I mean, we see how the local media is. The local media in Vegas relies on advertising money from the casinos. They literally fired the news director for running my story when I went into the elevator and went up with the gun case to the 32nd floor. Okay, right. They don't care about the truth when it comes to the Las Vegas media. And so anybody who was asking real important questions about Vegas was coming from out of town. And that's why, of course, they had to either deal with us or answer our questions or make it seem like they were at least pretending to answer our questions because, well, they wanted to get rid of us.
Yeah, they did. So Laura, you can't even book a hotel room at an MGM property.
I don't know. I mean, who knows? All I know is that I had... and this is why I wish I still had my Twitter account because I could show you guys all of these tweets because I was posting everything on Twitter. But I had received a screenshot from a source at one of the MGM resorts who worked security, and they said that there was a flyer with my face on it that said I wasn't allowed into MGM resort properties. Wow. So, if you recall, MGM was forced to issue a statement after I went inside their service elevator at Mandalay Bay, and that video is very damaging, especially for the victims and their family members, because MGM in the aftermath said they had issued a 24/7 security guard to stand in front of the service elevator to make sure that nothing could happen again. And as we showed, you could just walk right up, and they're liars, right? They said it wasn't terrorism, and now in their legal arguments, they're trying to say that they're protected from paying out, hundreds of millions, if not $1 billion in insurance payouts to these victims, because they're protected from a law that was passed in the aftermath of the 9/11 terrorist attacks that protects certain companies and makes them immune for liability when
exemption.
It comes to
It's
an exemption. So you have Lombardo saying it's not an act of terrorism, and now you have MGM saying it is an act of terrorism, and then you have Lombardo making deals with MGM Resorts for the Las Vegas Village, a $100 million property, to like make it into the new LVMPD SWAT center. So is it terrorism? Is it not? Right? Who is getting paid, and how much money was being moved around and shoved into the pockets and accounts of these corrupt officials to protect people in positions of power in Vegas?
right. And Joe and I went to the 32nd floor as well. Joe asked the guy if he had ever met Jesus Campos, and he laughed, right, Joe?
That's right. Yeah. That's right. He wouldn't say much. He was in the hallway right there, kind of. We went upstairs or downstairs. We went from 31st floor to the 32nd. Or did we go down?
Maybe 33rd. We had to do that because it was closed off, but we found our way over there, and this revealed that there was a guy stationed outside the door there. So, Joe, you're not involved.
Yeah.
You're not involved in any lawsuits against MGM, are you?
No.
I guess it's just people who were shot that are suing them.
Right.
Yeah.
Joe Napoli, I think you were named, though, in MGM's lawsuit against the victims, correct?
Oh, was
you
I?
were named. Yes, you were. You were named in that lawsuit. So MGM initiated a lawsuit against the victims, and Joe Napoli was named in that lawsuit.
What did it say about Joe?
Wow. Really?
It listed a whole bunch of people who were there, and basically what you remember, this was a big thing when MGM was countersuing basically and jumping and saying we're going to sue all of the attendees.
Because that's the step that they have to take to go to federal court instead of
correct
state level or something like that. That's right.
In order to make it a terrorist event, right? And so, assuming our research is correct, assuming that the stuff that Laura has done is correct, and it is, some blend of ISIS, Al Qaeda, these crazy guys, I just call them Wahhabis. At the end of the day, if that's what this was, it would explain the cover-up. It would explain so many of these inconsistencies, right? It explains everything that doesn't make any sense. And what Laura was saying about the gun deal is obvious to me, right? It's obvious to me Stephen Paddock thought he was selling somebody guns. Yep. And the reason, right, I think Laura and I are in absolute agreement on this. Right, Laura? Right?
Yeah, not just us. I mean, in the direct aftermath of the Las Vegas shooting, I went to SHOT Show, which is like probably the biggest gun expo in the world, which is held in Vegas. And I was speaking to several military level weapons dealers and people there who specialize in bump stock sales, and they were saying that the way that the guns and the bump stocks were laid out in the room, like look in the corner in that graphic you have up, how the bump stocks are laid out, that is a classic setup for an arms deal. And
there's a lot of things in these photos. So Jason, you know that I shoot, right? You know that I'm a shooter.
Yeah.
And what we see in this room, and when we look at the fit report, we see that there's something like 4,000 or 5,000 rounds of ammunition that went unused. And so if the shooting stops at 10:16 p.m. and Levi Hancock and the dog guys are at the door at 11:20, why wouldn't Stephen Paddock just keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going? Why would he stop if they weren't at the door? So there's all this unused ammunition. all these rifles that you just could have kept shooting. There was nobody kicking the door in, nobody forcing him to stop doing what he's doing. Why would he kill himself right in the midst of all that? It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I think Laura's absolutely right. I think Stephen Paddock thought he was selling guns. In some of my videos, I've made the comments sort of tongue-in-cheek. It's like a Tupperware party with guns. And I think he thought he was going to make a lot of money. And if the people who are buying these guns promise him that they're going to pay him using, let's just say, Bellagio chips, for example, that's untraceable.
Wow.
If somebody brings you, right, so if somebody brings you $500,000 worth of Bellagio chips,
Right.
and you're a Vegas guy,
Yeah.
that, you know,
Well, you just go down to the casino
that'll-
and cash them in.
that's a good Sunday night for that guy. So I think it was something like that, Laura. I think he thought he was doing a gun deal, and these, you know, these are ISIS guys. These are commandos. These are people ready to just bang. Hi, I'm Steven. Bang. And I think he was taken out, and the real guys took over. That's what I believe happened.
Well, yeah,
that's speculation. That's speculation.
I agree. I believe that he was taken out and that ISIS terrorists had carried that out. But I don't necessarily think that he was doing this to enrich himself. I really do believe that Paddock was some type of operative there. And when you look at the Fast and Furious scandal, for example, right? Similar type thing where you have government agencies and intelligence officials aware of the fact that guns are being given to members of the cartel in an effort to basically locate other members of crime organizations, right? I think that this was something very similar to that, but involving ISIS instead of the Mexican cartels, of course. Because when you look at Paddock, the computers for MGM were wiped within 24 hours. His data was completely wiped from the system, and the feds went into automatic cover-up mode as soon as they got their hands on the computers. Yeah. And in my investigation, I found a lot of really troubling information that you would only really be able to get away with if you were some type of federal agent. For example, Stephen Paddock transferred over $100,000 internationally to the Philippines to his then girlfriend, Mary Lou Danley. Mm-hmm. Well, what do we know about bank transfers? If you make a bank transfer, it doesn't matter how wealthy you are, any bank transfer, foreign or domestic, of $10,000 or more automatically gets flagged in the, I believe it's called the FinCEN system, yeah. And it's this financial database in which federal authorities are basically then triggered to investigate your accounts. Well, you know, if it's $100,000 overseas internationally, and we know that in the Philippines they have a problem with ISIS as well, you'd think that would trigger something. Well,
10,000 would trigger it.
Right? And what do we know about what about Stephen Paddock, right? His bank accounts, this information didn't come out until witness statements were released, I think, a year after the shooting. His ex-wife gave a statement that said that some of his bank accounts had been shut down on suspicion of terrorist activity. The only way that you would be able to keep banking after your bank accounts were shut down on suspicion of terrorist activity is if you had somebody pulling strings for you and you were some type of informant. I mean, regular people don't just get to keep banking when their accounts are shut down on suspicion of terrorist activity. Yeah. There was an Uber driver who said that Paddock had said that there was going to be some type of terrorist attack at the Mandalay Bay in the days leading up to this, right? There were many instances of like financial red flags. And the thing that I find to be most shocking in one of the reports I released was the fact that his account had been shut down on suspicion of terror financing. Yeah. So when the FBI says, oh, we don't know anything about this guy wasn't really known on our radar, you know, bullshit. He was on your radar because there's no way you didn't know about a guy who was making $100,000 in international transactions. They said he was a professional video poker player. There's no such thing. How does he afford his multi-million-dollar mansions? Oh, and by the way, you know, today I saw a story that was very suspicious. Mary Lou Danley is now living in a $3.4 million house. Where did she get that money from?
Wow.
I I thought
Yep.
that Stephen Paddock's belongings were auctioned off and given to victims, and that his mother had said that she wanted the money to go to victims. Where are his family members getting millions of dollars from? Who is giving them money to be quiet? I mean, you don't just have like millions of dollars after something like this. These people are dealing with massive lawsuits. Mary Lou Danley herself, her name was in the room. Her ID was found in the room. Her name was on the last valet ticket for the valet that was used in just hours before the shooting took place. Why is this woman walking free? Her fingerprints were found on the ammunition. How does a woman whose fingerprints were found on ammunition inside the room where this shooting took place end up living in a $3.4 million house in the aftermath? It just doesn't make sense.
She's probably going to In-N-Out Burger with Ghislaine Maxwell, and the FBI doesn't seem interested in that at all. This is shocking, Laura. I hadn't heard about this at all. But
well,
you're
not just the FBI, not
points.
just the FBI, not just the FBI. What about the Today Show? What about The View? Nobody wants to talk to Mary Lou Danley and find out what was it like to live with this guy. What was the story? What's the you didn't go to jail. Obviously, you're not guilty. What's the story? There's no book. There's no interview. Nobody wants to talk to her. No 60 Minutes. Nothing. Nobody. And to Laura's point, and she's living in a $3 million home in Los Angeles. He was wiring her $100,000.
And guess who else lives in Los Angeles?
Who's that?
Eric.
Brian Hodge, who's also Australian, just like Mary Lou Danley. So what the hell's going on here? And how come Brian Hodge hasn't done a book, right? We heard all.
I'm less suspicious of Brian Hodge than you are. So from my perspective, the thing that matters most is that people have to sort of swallow this pill. I guess that's why they call it this red pill phenomenon or whatever. I'm old for that. But this notion that this was an aerial attack. And once people see this evidence, and I'm not asking anybody to believe me, I'm asking just to look at the content, because the content is overwhelming at this point. We've published over 250 videos on my channel. And it's all really just evidence-based. I mean, I do a little bit of speculation of what I think is going on. But once you realize that this is an aerial attack, and then you look at these autopsies, right? So this leverages this research that you guys were doing. You look at the autopsies and you say, well, are these autopsy results consistent with an aerial attack? And it is. And then would an aerial attack be consistent with what Joe Napoli witnessed? These empty shell casings over by the Tropicana, which obviously couldn't have come from Stephen Paddock. And so when you start piecing all this stuff together, it's just an overwhelming cover-up. And the only time our government seems willing to go through an overwhelming cover-up is when there are Saudi royals involved with the funding of the enterprise. The last time was 16 years ago.
Or some type of Islamic terrorist activity. And you're right about that. Whether it's Saudis or whether it's ISIS, whatever, the ideology is still the same. Doesn't really matter at the end of the day.
I don't think it's necessarily one or the other. I think it's all of them.
What people need to understand is clearly we cannot trust our intelligence agencies, but it's not far-fetched for our intelligence agencies to cover up acts of Islamic terrorism and to have terrorists and informants who are aware of terrorist attacks on FBI payroll.
Yeah.
For example, it's been 2 years since the Las Vegas shooting, obviously, today. Remember the Pulse Orlando nightclub shooting where Omar Mateen, that was then the worst mass shooting. And it's funny, right? Whenever an Islamic terrorist carries out an attack, it's always a mass shooting, right? It's not a terrorist attack, right? They always say it's a mass shooting. And you see that they use this as a way to take away our bump stocks. Well, in the aftermath of the Orlando terrorist attack, in which Omar Mateen, an ISIS terrorist, walked into a gay club in Orlando, Florida, and killed 49 people, we were told that this guy just, carried out the attack in the name of ISIS, and that was that, and that no one knew about it, and then, the wife was arrested and she was on trial. Well, I was reporting on the trial, right? I went to the trial, and I was actually banned from the trial. And the reason why they weren't able to give a guilty verdict to his wife who actively participated in the planning of the terrorist attack?
I can't recall.
They weren't able to convict this woman because it was revealed in the last week during the trial that Omar Mateen's father was an FBI informant at the time of the shooting.
That's right.
Okay?
That's right.
I remember that.
His father had been on the record supporting the Taliban, and yet the FBI was paying this guy to be an informant at the time that his son carried out the worst, terrorist attack on U.S. soil since 9/11. And because the FBI interrogated the wife in the aftermath of the terrorist attack, and they didn't disclose prior to interrogating her that her father-in-law was an informant, they said, "Oh, well, it's tainted, and so we can't say that she's guilty." And then when she was set free, the jury foreman said, "Well, it's a real shame that the FBI withheld evidence because we know that she's guilty, and there's all this evidence that she aided her husband in planning this terrorist attack, but the FBI withheld the fact that he was an informant." Like, do
you see a common thread here, Laura? Do you see a common thread with this, with Mary Lou Danley, with Ghislaine Maxwell? Nobody wants to talk to them. I don't understand this, Jason. Nobody wants to talk to Ghislaine Maxwell. Nobody wants to talk to Mary Lou Danley. Nobody wants to talk to Omar Mateen's wife.
But nobody in the FBI does.
Right?
Yeah.
I do, but they ban us. I mean, look, Laura Loomer says her media credentials were taken away from her at trial.
Right.
The Pulse nightclub widow. I was physically escorted out of that trial by an armed U.S. Marshal, and then I was paper arrested and interrogated by Department of Homeland Security at a terrorism trial for simply asking questions in the press pool. I wasn't shouting questions during the trial. I was being a journalist and asking important questions. And so, this is a problem. This is a problem in our country where people who are really trying to expose the truth and get answers are shut down and silenced and censored. Right. And then you have our intelligence agencies, which have, they had a $58 billion budget in the U.S. intelligence agencies for the year of 2018. And their job is to prevent these attacks and to get answers. And we're doing a better job as investigative journalists than they are.
Yeah, that's what's happening for sure. Wait, it looks like Joe's got something on his mind. What did you want to say, Joe?
Well, I was going to ask Laura. Wasn't there an attorney out in California here? It may have been Catherine Lombardo. No relation to Joe. But didn't she get an injunction or a stay on Paddock's estate where their money couldn't be dispersed?
I'm not too familiar with that. Honestly, no. I want to say yes or no, but I don't want to give information away. But I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily even trust that woman either. I mean, I think that the way that she jumped on Scott Perry during his interview on Tucker Carlson, and she freaked out and had a meltdown when he said that ISIS was involved, when she is supposed to be representing the victims. I mean, why is she so?
Right.
Well, easy, guys. She just passed away. Catherine Lombardo passed away about a week or 10 days ago.
Oh, from what?
Cancer.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, she passed away.
That's tragic and everything, but interesting timing to say the least. I mean, cancer. It's just very interesting to me. It's very interesting how these things happen, and it's tragic. Yeah, a young woman dying from cancer, but I just find it to be kind of very interesting legally how this case is progressing.
Well, right. So let's ask a real basic question together. So, Joe, you've got a whole bunch of survivors, supposedly, that Catherine Lombardo was representing, and that's why Fox had her on TV. So Catherine Lombardo and Doug Papa were sort of the go-to for Tucker Carlson. And he would have Catherine Lombardo and Doug Papa on the show, and when he went to Vegas, he had them on the show. And supposedly Catherine Lombardo was representing a bunch of victims, a bunch of survivors, and now she's passed away. Mm-hmm. And it was the Catherine Lombardo law firm. Before that, it was the Napoli law firm that she worked for. And now she left Napoli and she started the Catherine Lombardo law firm. And so my question is, what happens to all those victims? What happens to all those survivors that she was representing?
Wow.
Where they go?
A week before the 2-year anniversary of the Las Vegas shooting?
Correct.
That's a good question, John. Hopefully they're still being represented. I would hope so, but I would be surprised if they got
complicates it for sure, right, John?
And her wife is a police chief. Catherine Lombardo's wife is the chief of police in the town where they live.
Really?
Yeah, they live in I think it's Claremont.
Claremont, that's right, yeah. Claremont. Yeah. So she left. If you go to like obituary.com or something, she leaves behind a wife who is a chief of police.
Interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I know Joe is a little pressed for time, and I want to get this out tonight. I don't want to cut the conversation short, but was there anything else that you guys wanted to discuss?
Well, I think that there's a lot more information that's going to come out probably during trial, and so for people who want to say that we're conspiracy theorists for mentioning the fact that Paddock could be some type of informant and that ISIS was involved, just look at the Omar Mateen trial. 2 years after the fact, we find out that the father was on FBI payroll. I mean, who's to say we won't find something else out about Paddock or Mary Lou Danley, right? And there were already planes and belongings that belonged to them that traced back to individuals in the CIA and government institutions, especially his little plane. So I just think that we're going to probably find a lot more out when this goes to trial, and people are going to be testifying under oath, because you can't claim that it's terrorism for the sake of the LVMPD FBI investigation, because MGM Resorts doesn't get to define whether something's terrorism. The FBI has to declare something to be terrorism. So somebody's going to go to jail for perjury, hopefully. I mean, maybe not. You know, we already know there's two sets of laws in this country, but somebody really should be going to jail for perjury here. It's either Aaron Rouse, Sheriff Lombardo, or the executives at MGM. Because if it's really terrorism, then the FBI's got a lot of explaining to do.
Even if it's not, the FBI has a lot of explaining to do, but it is. It clearly is.
Explaining to do, but that's called fraud. When you try to say that that you have a terrorism exemption and you're clearly participating in financial swindle deals with the FBI and Sheriff Lombardo and donating to these people's political campaigns to get them elected in the middle of the investigation of this terrorist attack, I mean, you don't get to just say that something's a terrorist attack.
Well, you do. No, Laura, I have to correct you. You do. And this is something that Jason and I have been talking about quite a bit. And during the Obama administration, there was something called the Smith-Mundt Act repeal. And when you win the seat for Congress, and I wish I lived in West Palm Beach, I'd vote for you, the second I could. But when you get to Congress, you have got to get the Smith-Mundt repeal thing turned around. The government is producing propaganda. Yeah. And it's got to stop. It has to stop. We're paying for it. They're using our money to create nonsense.
Well, I think we're even interacting with some of the people that are contracting to the government to do it.
And many of them may not even know it. I give them the benefit of the doubt. They may not even know they're working for the GEC.
Well, John,
they're just giving...
They just changed the whistleblower rules, I guess, right? So
that's right.
In August, now it can be on secondhand information, right?
Yeah, and the thing that's so strange about that is that hearsay information like that is not even admissible in a civil court case, but yet now they're using it to try to impeach the president of the United States. The world is totally upside down, and I can... the reaction that each of you guys are having to this event is totally understandable and really visceral. And I know that Laura is frustrated because her investigations into this have really shut down her life in a lot of practical senses. And Joe, of course, you and your family have had the trauma of being, in the line of fire, literally. John has experienced a lot of harassment online, and He's had to, literally be in hiding for like 2 years to just do this kind of research. So I really appreciate each of you coming together for the show. I think what we should do is probably wrap it up right now so I can get this out tonight. And I think
I wanted to take a second. I want to take a second just to salute the work that Laura has done and the bravery that Joe has shown and everything that you've done, Jason, in this 2-year period. Quite remarkable.
Thank you, Joan.
I appreciate that, and your videos as well are exceptional. And I really do think that the view count is pretty ridiculous because for the information that we're releasing, it's clear that YouTube is suppressing your stuff because your videos should have way more than 3,000 or 5,000 views. Because there are a lot of people searching for information about the Vegas shooting, and I just don't believe that our view counts are as low as they are. And it's just really tragic that, big tech has partnered with these people to shut people down because, this is history and it's all being deleted by people who just don't want people seeing this information. And I don't know.
I can't wait for you to get to Congress. I can't wait.
I'm excited. And when I'm in Congress, I'm definitely going to be making an issue out of this because the investigation into the Las Vegas shooting needs to be reopened. And those representatives in Congress who did receive that briefing from intelligence officials that showed that there was evidence of ISIS crossing over the border, they need to speak out about what they heard and what they received in this briefing because the public deserves to know. And Scott Perry was heroic in his statements on Tucker Carlson, and he shouldn't be bullied and shut down in silence. I want to hear what Scott Perry has to say. I want to hear him talk about what was in that briefing, which I have reported on. The people deserve to know.
How far is Mesa, Arizona from the Mexican border?
Yeah, not far. Have you had a chance to speak to Scott Perry, Laura?
No, because they pretty much issued gag orders on all these people. If you recall, remember I published that document that I got access to right after his interview, and there were 19 representatives in Nevada politics, both on the Republican and Democrat side, who demanded him to apologize. They were like, oh, you need to apologize for saying that ISIS was involved in this. I mean, why would you be attacking?
They came
apologize to who? ISIS?
Yes, they did. They wanted him to backpedal. They wanted him to wind it back. Yeah. She's absolutely right.
19 representatives. You can pull up this article. I published this article, and you can see it for yourself. 19 representatives in Nevada on both Republican and Democrat sides in all levels, all positions of power in Nevada, wrote a bipartisan letter asking Representative Perry to apologize for his comments about the Las Vegas shooting. And this is what I was talking about with regards to Catherine Lombardo. Why would you be pressuring a sitting congressman who received this information and is informing the public that ISIS had involvement in this? I mean, what do you have to gain by covering this up? Right? So that was when I realized, wow, ISIS really is involved, because if you have such a visceral reaction from members of both parties in Nevada, probably who are all receiving donations from the same casinos and we all know that Nevada is controlled and operated by the casino moguls. That's the article right there. You can see that. Congressman briefed on FBI's failure to investigate ties to the Vegas shooting. And then another article will talk about the letter. So
and now coming off of Laura's report, I included Scott Perry in my tweets for about 6 months with no response.
Yeah.
So I would include at Scott Perry in my tweets to get his attention, given that he seemed to be curious. And so I was sharing my content, nothing, crickets.
Yeah, same here. I reached out to his office and didn't hear anything either. But you clearly see it's not a conspiracy theory. He is on video on Tucker Carlson. You can watch the video for yourself. And people went.
No question.
And I don't know why. I mean, Catherine Lombardo, she may have passed away, but it doesn't disregard the fact that she, freaked out on Tucker Carlson's show and demanded that Scott Perry, take back what he said. I mean, if you're representing the victims, why are you trying to say that this information from a congressman is incorrect? It just seems very bizarre to me. It doesn't really seem like a lot of the lawyers who were involved in representing victims are really like representing victims for the sake of justice. It seems like
might be
There was-
in there to prevent the victims from getting justice. We don't know who's paying those lawyers.
Yeah.
A lot of powerful people in Vegas who don't want this getting out.
I never trust lawyers, so yeah, that's my take personally.
Well, guys.
Well, again, I'm very grateful to both of you for your research. So I couldn't have done half of what I've done or 3/4 of what I've done without the two of you guys, and I'm incredibly grateful.
It's kind of you to say, John. I think the two of you have done the best investigation on this incident of anybody, and I think there's a lot more conversation to be had in the future. Laura, thanks so much for taking time out of your busy campaign schedule to speak with us. John, thank you for revealing yourself to the public for the first time on this somber occasion, but both of you have done fantastic work, and I look forward to hearing more from you in the future.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Yeah.
Bye-bye
All right,
now.
guys. We'll see you soon. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to John Cullen's John E. Hoover YouTube channel. John is also on Patreon now. John, what's the Patreon address for your channel?
If you go to patreon.com/IamJohnCullen.
You're going to get the exclusive podcast there. People should be visiting Laura Loomer for Congress.com. Laura, wish you the best of luck. I really do want to see you win in Congress, and I can't wait for that to happen. I also want people to remember that I can't bring you these types of shows without the support of the audience. Crowdsource the Truth is completely viewer supported, so please go to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth or subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth and become a sponsor. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great night.